Well, good morning, everybody. And let's see, today is September 11th. Oh, it's 9/11. Okay, it's 9/11 anniversary. So thoughts and prayers for that. And it's the Smart Networker Zoom call. And today's going to be an interesting day. Over the weekend, Gary Linder posted a nice video on water. And just prior to that posting, I had contacted Elaine Connelly, who I work with, and I said, we should do something on water because I'm getting an awful lot of questions on the subject of water. So we planned to do this event, and then all of a sudden Gary posted a video. But what we're going to talk today about is the other considerations that weren't addressed or talked about fully, and more information specific to questions that you would typically get asked if somebody was asking about comparisons or other things. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Elaine Connelly. Now, Elaine is a gold consultant, and she's from Ohio, which is some part, that's over there in the United States somewhere. I'm not quite sure what part of it, but it's over there. Anyway, she, again, a gold consultant, but she also has an integrated health and energy medicine practice, which keeps her involved. And as a professional in the nursing arena for most of her career, this gives her a lot of very valuable data. And in working with Elaine over the past year or so, I have gathered a tremendous amount of knowledge with respect to health and wellness and what we have in terms of Nikan. But today we're going to focus on the water. And so welcome, Elaine.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for
Dave.
being on here. So there's a number of considerations or questions that people get asked. And I have a list of questions that was created for this particular event today. And I'm just going to ask the questions and we'll get into a dialogue and then you answer them. This will be recorded so people can watch it and go through it and get the information they want. So the first question is, what is in tap water that we should be concerned about?
Well, basically, what's in tap water is chemicals. And anybody that filters water, which is usually a municipal water system, whether it's a city or village, it can even be the county, is required by the EPA to do an annual water report. And that's open to the public. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth when we get to that more detailed question. But bottom line is you've got pharmaceuticals, you've got heavy metals, you still have bacteria in there, you have arsenic, you have lead, and then you could be taking somebody else's Prozac, or other medication that is not filtered out by the filtration plants. So that is just a little snippet of what is in there and why you don't really want to be drinking tap water. I have clients say, well, my doctor tells me I'm going to be okay if I just boil the water. Well, that's fine. That'll get a certain amount of chlorine out of the water, but it doesn't address the heavy metals and it doesn't address, the pharmaceuticals that are in the water. And so that's why water is so important. And Dr. Gary and Heather did a very nice water presentation on why we need PIMAG water and the benefits of it. And what I wanted to address were those other water considerations that I interact with my clients on. And then I've also learned from them. I have a few that I have a couple customers that worked for water departments. So they've been up close and personal, relative to those areas. And they have certifications in the water filtration field. So tap water is not your friend.
Okay.
And one of the questions I got from one of my clients last year was, you know what? Well, my animals drink tap water. And I said, sure, they're going to drink tap water because that's all you're giving them. You can't live without water and your animals are no different. But as Dr. Gary pointed out in his presentation, when they have a choice between good filtered alkaline water and tap water, they'll always go to that bowl that has the filtered alkaline water.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So what about well water then? Is well water different?
Yeah. Hi, Cam. Well, I'm gonna have her come outside with me for a little bit. Come on.
So with well water, I didn't know anything. They don't teach you anything about water in nursing school. Basically, in nursing school, we learned that anything liquid would hydrate you. Well, that couldn't be farther from the truth. As soon as you add anything to water, it changes the property of water. And with well water, I learned about that in the late 80s and early 90s prior to getting into the health and wellness field. I lived in the country south of Cleveland, and we had a well that was 260 feet deep. And there was just something about that well water that I wasn't comfortable with. It didn't taste bad, didn't smell, but I just was not comfortable with it. And we had a picnic at my house, and I talked to the dairy farmer across the street who had an intergenerational farm. And I asked him, I said, I understand that your well was put in at the same time that mine was, and it's 260 feet deep. And he said, yes. And I said, well, do you drink your well water? And he said, heck no. And I said, why? And he said, Elaine, my father was allowed to put Agent Orange on the fields in the 60s and 70s. And if they were that was allowed in Medina County, Ohio, you know they did it across the country. The United States is known as a chemical society. You know, we're driven by big pharma. And anytime the big industries have an excess of a chemical, they don't want to lose money. So they figure out, you know, a way to use it. And that's exactly what they did with chlorine. And that's what they did with fluoride. And in the case of Agent Orange, my understanding is that they allowed it, the EPA, to be put on the fields across the country.
Wow. Wow.
And the thing of it is that people say, well, tell me, well, you know, I live next door to the Amish community, and they don't use herbicides and pesticides. Well, that's fine, but that's on the top of the soil. Everything goes down into water tables that are very fluid and are moving throughout, you know, the bedrock and everything like that. So that's why a good number of organic farms are being contaminated, you know, by way of the water tables underneath the soil.
Got it. Fantastic. Thank you. Now, you hear a lot of people say, well, I like to buy spring water. So how do we define spring water?
Well, spring water, I go back to when I grew up in the 50s and 60s. My grandfather had a farm in the country east of Cleveland, and he had a spring. And this is prior to, and he farmed, you know, he had animals, he grew corn. They did not have genetically modified seed at that time, and they certainly didn't use chemicals on the fields. We were the only English that were on the road that he lived on, you know, otherwise it was Amish families. And so there's a great difference between spring water nowadays and spring water decades ago. Again, it goes back to the water tables. We had clean spring water until they started getting contaminated with Roundup. Our food has been tested. There's Roundup in everything, including us. And again, Roundup is banned in Europe, but we still use it here in the United States. So it's a water table issue. And there's an organization out there, EWG.org, which is the Environmental Working Group. And those are the scientists from Canada and the US. And if you go to their website and you do a hover on the banner, you will find consumer guides, and then you go into the tap water database, and then you enter your zip code, and they will rate the quality of your water based on some of the things that we're talking about. So according to my Cuyahoga County water report, my water is pure and clean, and according to EPA standards, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But according to the EWG database, I have 13 known contaminants that are disease causing in my water from this database. So you see the difference, you know, yep. EPA standards is one thing, you know, when you're looking at a lot of these chemicals, that's another story.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, one of the things I think we're all aware of is the pollutants and the bottled water and you know, is a staggering figure that was brought up, that bottled water in the ocean will weigh more than the fish in the ocean by the year 2050 is a pretty staggering figure. So what is in bottled water, and could you describe that or tell us about that one?
Well, there's no quality control, number one. You know, anything that is crinkly plastic, all right, is basically the plastic is going to leach in the water. So the one known that we know is in bottled water is plastic. Beyond that, like I said, there's no quality control. Back in 2018, periodically the industry, it's not really the industry, it's one of the watchdog organizations, will test the different brands of bottled water and talk about what contaminants they find. But you're going to find those things that you don't want in your body. I did a health fair probably 5 or 6 years ago at a church, and I had the waterfall there. And one of the attendees came up and said, you know, Pastor has bought this bottled water, you know, and I'm drinking this. What's so special about that? And I took the bottled water, and on the label, see, people don't read labels. That's one of the major pitfalls in the United States. They're busy, they grab, they start drinking, and they pay more attention to the oil they're putting in their car than they do in their bodies, the food and water they're putting in their bodies. But I looked at the label, and it was from the water system in Rochester, New York. It was from the municipal water system in Rochester, New York. So I said, where's the pastor? And she said, well, he's over there. And I said, are you going in that direction? And she said, yes. So I said, ask him to step over here. He had 7 pallets of this municipal water, bottled water from Rochester, New York, that he had paid a pretty penny for, that he was planning on taking back to the store.
Amazing.
I mean, those are just real life stories. But the number one thing that we can do as consultants with Nikan is educate people to
Yes.
read labels.
Yes.
Read
Very
labels.
important. I saw a video on this where really all the bottled water, all the companies are just going into the water systems underneath the ground and pumping out the water, and that's what's becoming bottled water as well as tap water. Okay, the next question: what's reverse osmosis?
Well, the people I've learned over the industries, and a good number of you here on the Zoom have also heard the water experts. Reverse osmosis water is the cleanest water on the planet, as is distilled water, but it's also the most acidic. All right. And in true health, your body should be a pH of 7.3, 7.4. That's why Nikan Mag alkaline water is so important. It helps us keep and stay in a alkaline state, even with the stress that we have around us. It's one of those factors. But when you're drinking reverse osmosis water that has an average pH of 6.2, 6.6, it basically will draw the minerals, your calcium and magnesium, out of your bones and out of your tissues. And that's exactly how kidney stones form. I learned about kidney stones because I had one, you know, a couple of years after I was in Nikan. And I thought, how is this possible? I'm drinking alkaline water. Well, guess what? I wasn't drinking enough. I wasn't taking steps to support the cleaning of my liver. And when I changed the quantity of water that I was drinking, and I started cleaning out my liver on a daily basis, no more kidney stones. So it's a matter of, over time, reverse osmosis and distilled water, you know, will rob your body of the electrolytes that it needs. One of my first clients in my practice was a young woman who had too much calcium in her blood. And so it was called hypercalcemia. And she had seen 4 doctors, and she was a referral to my practice. And so I went through, you know, the lifestyle assessment with her. And I found out, you know, that she was drinking distilled water at the recommendation of one of her doctors. And I said to her the same thing I just told you. And I said, I'm not a water expert, but I said, I'm being told by water experts that this is what's happening. So she said, well, how do we find out if that's my problem? Because they're not finding anything else. So I said, I'll loan you. And at that time, it was an Aquaphor that I loaned her. And I said, for the next week, all I want you to do is drink this water. You know, nothing else, just plain water. Have your coffee, tea in the morning, but just this water. And she was due to have blood work done in 2 weeks, I think it was. She was on the water, and she had her blood work done, and she had a normal calcium level. So again, it goes back to drinking the right quantity of water, but the quality of the water, is also highly important in that regard. Also, the reverse osmosis systems are very, very expensive to run. People are putting in whole house systems, that can run anywhere between $10,000 and $18,000 for whole house systems. And over time, it will basically rob your body of those electrolytes. Now, some of the RO systems are putting in what they call alkalinizing filters, where they will add minerals back into the water. But see, water is intelligent. You have all those books by Emoto, on living water. And water will always revert back to its original state. So if you have RO water, those electrolytes that you're putting in that water eventually are basically going to, I don't know whether they disappear or what happens to them, but that water over time will turn acidic, unless you drink it when it's alkaline. And artificially created alkaline water initially will hydrate you to a certain point, but then over time, it still acts as acidic water in your system.
Well, it's kind of like, this society has gone to, manufacturing food and altering food, and every time we go away from what's natural, it creates problems, including water. So this is fascinating. Okay, so what's zero water?
Well, I came across zero water in my practice also. And this is a filtration system that takes out all the ppm, which is the small particulate matter that's in the water, and that small ppm is your minerals. So this filtration actually turns out to be creating reverse osmosis water. And when they market these units, they give the people a little meter that measures ppm. So when they get zero, they think they're good. All right. And I had a woman, that basically was testing herself alkalinity wise, and she was always testing that she was too acid, that she wasn't hydrated. And so again, told her use the waterfall, etc., educated her on the whole idea of the fact that the ppm in the water are the good minerals, and she got better.
Fantastic. Now, the next question, this one I find fascinating. What is the water composition in the body?
Well, Gary addressed this to a certain extent, but I did find a graph, and I don't want to misquote this, so I'm going to reference it. The water composition of the human body, your bones are 22% water. Your kidneys are 70% water. Your muscles are 70% water. Your heart is 79% water. Your brain is 85% water, and your blood is 95% water.
Wow.
So I can send these files to people, because this is something that I educate, my clients on, because a lot of them will sit there and say, well, I don't like water. Well, tell me why you don't like water. All right. And some of it goes from childhood, so they've been chronically dehydrated, for many years. And Dr. Gary, always points out with his water presentations, that the imbalance starts with dehydration. And it's your body that decides what body systems to tumble, what hormones to put out of balance. All right. And once you start correcting, number one, hydration, then you can begin to see, a recovery to a certain extent. The other question I get from my clients is, well, how soon will I see a difference? And the question is, I don't know. Because your health is not just water. Your health is your lifestyle, it's your sleep, it's all the things that Nikan addresses with their technologies, with the water, the clean air, the sleep, the whole food nutrition. And then also, your stress level and whether or not, your adrenal glands are turned out all the time, or are you able to relax? And those are all of the components that will either keep you in a good positive frequency state, or whether you're going to be in a negative basement when you get up in the morning.
Many, many years ago, when I was first getting into this arena of healthcare and health food industry, and I was told that other liquids that aren't water, like a Coke or Gatorade or coffee or tea, the body looks at them as a food versus as water. Can you address that?
Yeah, basically, you're right in that your body addresses it as a food, but those what you're naming are not really hydrating agents, if you will, all right, or options for you. One of the other questions I get is, well, I don't believe that alkaline water is on the up and up because you have a stomach that's acidic that's going to deactivate the alkaline water. And I sat there and I thought, oh, well, let me find out an answer about that one. So I put an all call out there to the integrated medicine doctors, and the response I got back was very interesting. I'm going to narrow down some of the medical lingo as much as I can. But bottom line is, your stomach does not have a pocket of hydrochloric acid sitting there, okay, waiting for the food. All right, if it did, it would erode a hole in your stomach. So your body's intelligent, so that when your food goes into your stomach, which is also, it starts digestion in your mouth and then goes down into your stomach. When it goes into your stomach, you're getting the signaling, and it's such a complex digestive system that I'm sure that Western science has not been able to analyze at all. That being said, the pancreatic enzymes, which are acidic, will flow into the stomach because it's recognizing there's food there to begin the digestive process. All right. So then once that digestive process is done, that pancreatic acidic enzyme turns off. Then the food is going to then move into the small intestine, where the majority of digestion takes place. But then what happens is that your gallbladder begins to put an alkalinizing fluids into that digestive bulk that's there that needs to be digested. So when someone says to me, I don't believe that that alkaline water can benefit you because you have an acidic stomach, that's the explanation. We know that as soon as you put a nitroglycerin tablet under somebody's tongue, that there's an immediate response, and that angina discomfort in their chest starts to go away even before the whole thing is melted. And so there is a mouth and brain immediate connection. And so you start hydrating as soon as you put water in your mouth. And it's just not happening in segments in parts of your body. So when I read this and it was done by a chemist that explained it in a lot more depth, and he had formulas and everything like that. But that's the gist of what I took away from this article, which made perfect sense to me at the time, and that I've communicated, to clients and people that want to hear more about the water.
That's fascinating. That's more education on that system than I've ever had. So this is good stuff. Now, going to change the topic just slightly. You mentioned this early on. It's the annual county water report. How do you what's that, and how do you get it?
Well, bottom line is the EPA requires all agencies that are creating potable water for drinking to do an annual water report. And so I have the previous water report, and then I have the current one. And the previous water report, and I'm just going to hold it up so that you can see it. You can't read it, but you can see where it is readable, right? And I have things circled on it. The Cleveland water report that just came out, and this came out in November, all right, is printed like this, and it's so light that you need a magnifying glass to read it. You cannot increase to beyond 100% to read it. But basically what I attempted to do was glean to see and do a comparison between the previous water report and this one. So what the EPA does is they list out an acceptable amount of chemicals that are able to be in tap water when it's delivered to your house. And so anytime you have a range, they call it a range of detections. And you can go on to whoever's doing your annual water report. Where does your water come from? Most of it is coming from the counties. So you can find it online and you can print it and you can read it. And what you have to look for are the range of detections. So it's going to give you a 0 to another figure. All right. And so the first one is arsenic. There's arsenic in that water that's coming out of your tap, and it has an acceptable range. Now, I didn't know there was an acceptable range for arsenic, and I don't want arsenic in my body. There's also an acceptable level of lead. Then you have what they call organic contaminants, and there's different levels found. And this is where those VOCs, those volatile organic compounds, come into place. And the majority of them are coming from the byproducts of the chlorination and the fluoride in the water. Both chlorine and fluoride are cancer-causing agents. Cancer-causing agents. And it's been proven by research. You also have an acceptable amount of bacteria, a percentage here. There also are what they call unregulated contaminants. I didn't know you could have unregulated contaminants, but you can, which are chloroform, and the other two I can't even pronounce. But again, they're byproducts of drinking water chlorination. So this water report that I have from Cleveland is 13 pages long. And what they did with this report from 2022 is they actually put steps and stages of the water treatment process in here. So I'm just going to list out the treatment chemicals they use. They use potassium permanganate. They use activated carbon. They use aluminum sulfate, and we know where aluminum goes. That goes directly to your brain as a heavy metal. They use sodium hypochlorite, which is chlorine. They use fluoride. They use phosphoric acid or orthophosphate, which is a herbicide, basically, and sodium hydroxide. So then it also lists treatment steps. And in these treatment steps, there's 10 of them. So on treatment steps number 5, they put in some of these chemicals in order to have flocculation take place. It's flocculation, and that means that it combines with what you don't want in the water and it settles out and then hope gets filtered. So then that's happens at step number 6. Step number 8 is where the filtration comes into play. And so this is where, they will use some of the other processes and screens and getting those sediments out that go to the bottom, etc. But then what's very interesting, in step 9, they talk about disinfection and finishing. So keep in mind that step 8 is where you're filtering out stuff. Well, guess what happens in step number 9 is they put more chemicals in order, this is where the chlorine comes in, this is where the fluoride comes in. It's not filtered out of your water, it's actually going into your body. And so the water reports are very interesting to read, to understand that your water, the water here talks about pure, clean water. Well, it's according to the EPA standards, not EWG.org.
So
Now,
okay, so the lesson here then is everybody get your water report so you can understand what the heck's in your water.
And I'll tell you what, people people are very grateful that you're pointing this out to them. I can't tell you, I use this water report at every NECAN presentation I use, not in the depth that I'm doing now, but I encourage people to, and I have this in a Microsoft Office file that I can send people if they live in this county. But you can go, whatever county you live in, you can go get it. And people are happy to see that because sometimes in a partnership, one partner doesn't totally understand the concerns of the other partner. But when there is data and quality identifying that there's problems here, then they're more willing to listen. Now, the other thing that's happened in Ohio is we have a retired chemist from one of the petroleum industries that lives in Medina County, and he himself has a one-man initiative going to get the fluoride out of the water. There are 3 or 4 counties in Ohio that no longer fluoridate their water. All right. But part of the problem also is the fact that fluoride, by research, and this was the Cancer Research Institute 34 years ago, said that fluoride causes more human cancer death and causes it faster than any other chemical. Only 8 countries in the world have more than 50% of the population on fluoridated water. The US has 70%, Australia has 90%, Ireland has 70%, Singapore is 100%, Chile is 70%, New Zealand is 52%, Malaysia is 66%. 98% of Europe is not fluoridated. And guess what? They have half our cancer rates and half our disease rates. Fluoride is put into the public water supply. However, if you put any fluoride into any stream, basically it would be deemed an act of terrorism. But we put it in our water.
Amazing.
The other aspect of this is that your drugs are also not clean. All right. You have what is called fluoridated antibiotics, where they put fluoride in antibiotics. And the top 2 drugs that have the fluoride antibiotics are Cipro, which is very, very frequently prescribed, and Avalox. And they do billions in sales every year. But no other antibiotic carries as high a potential to cause serious permanent injuries and even death as they call them fluoroquinolones. Despite their higher than normal risk, doctors frequently prescribe them as a first line of treatment, even for mild infections. And so I haven't taken an antibiotic probably for 30 years. I use colloidal silver, and I've used it with my pets. You can get it from any health food store. It's a natural antibiotic, doesn't interfere with any other medication, and it's very effective. So anytime my animals needed antibiotics for whatever reason, I put them on the colloidal silver, and it worked just fine. Now, the other thing that you find, with fluoride, it can cause eye issues. It can cause acute kidney failure, brain fog, depression, rashes, seizures, heart damage, and acute liver toxicity. So there you go.
Well, thank you very much for that report. Okay, now I'd like to kind of...
There is good news, though. There is good news.
Yes. I'd like to take the last 3 topics, which are alkalinity versus naturally create or artificial alkalinity versus natural, the benefits of the PIMAG water, and the NIH study on water hydration and health, and wrap this thing up.
Okay, so what I've learned is, remember when I mentioned at the beginning that water is intelligent, and we know that is true. And so water will revert back to what its nature was to begin with. And so you can alkalinize tap water. You can alkalinize any water. And so now you have contaminated alkaline water. And most of the water systems, treatment plants will put in a chemical agent to make the water at least neutral at 7.0. So that being said, there are systems out there that artificially create alkaline water. And what I mean by that are systems that plug in that use electricity. Basically, they are artificially creating alkaline water. They're not using a natural process. If you look at the Nikken Pymag water process, that is a naturally created alkaline water. There's no electricity being used. You're using the power of nature with charcoal, with the zeolite, with the ceramic beads, with the silica sand. All of that is natural. And so that is naturally created alkaline water, the Nikken Pymag water. The other water that's artificially created is not going to hydrate you over time. You initially will have a benefit for maybe 1 to 2 weeks. All right. And then over time, that water, your body's going to treat that water as if you're drinking acidic water every day. So it's a natural process. If you lose your electricity in your house and you have a system that requires electricity to filter your water, guess what? You have no filtered water. So there is on YouTube, you can go in and you can do a search for Dr. Kim, K-I-M. And he is the scientist that created the Aquapore initial filter cartridge. And on this YouTube, which is probably, I think, about 5 or 7 minutes long, he is actually filtering Shanghai River water. And then he also puts wine in the top of that Aquapore and it comes out clear. And so what I tell people is if I lose the pump to my house, I have lakes and ponds in my development. I have no qualms about taking that pond water and putting it through my unit. Now, Nikken will never tell you to do that because by regulation, it has to be potable water. But in an emergency, I don't have any qualms of that Pymag water system is going to filter. If it can filter Shanghai River water, it can certainly filter my pond water, in my development.
Awesome.
Now the other aspect of that we talked about, so the benefits of Pi water, it has a higher degree of antioxidants, but one of the major benefits is the fact that there's been 2 studies done, the University of Georgia, and I can't remember the other one. I can send it to people. But what they did was they analyzed water in the body, and they found that structured water always surrounds healthy cells, and unstructured water surrounds disease cells. So the magnet that's in the spout from the Pymag water creates structured water. So that's another benefit of the Pymag water, is that you are drinking not only good filtered alkaline water, but you're also changing the structure of the water so that it is, when people say it's more absorbable, that's why, because you've changed it from unstructured to structured water. So I need to tell you, probably about maybe 8 years ago, I did a research search to find out what research was out there about water. And 8 years ago, there was 1 study. Now there's a heck of a lot more. All right. And there's a 30-page study from the NIH about water and whether it has any benefit to health. And so I thought, well, this is interesting. I mean, my tax dollars are probably paying for this. And so their end conclusion is that you need water to live. That was their conclusion. They have no idea on the importance of water from the Western science end of things. They still feel that if you drink soup, eat Jell-O, anything liquid, that's going to count as your water, and it really, really doesn't.
That's amazing. Super. Well, that was an education. I think this is going to answer a lot of questions for folks, and especially those people that are looking at the Pymag water system and why we feel it is so valuable, not only for consumption, but for the benefit of creating a wonderful business. because there's about 128 million households in the United States that need this product. So,
Well, what
thank you
came
very much,
across
Elaine.
my desk this morning, by email, was that Gatorade is now going to start manufacturing in the first quarter of 2024 Gatorade water. Okay, so they're going to enter into the water industry here. It's going to be electrolyte infused, and PepsiCo owns them. It's going to be a 7-step filtration process, which probably means reverse osmosis, which is going to be very wasteful. But the water industry itself is projected to reach 18 billion by 2025. So it will result, Gatorade water will be alkaline, and it'll also, get this, it'll have bright colors and flavors. All right. Red dye and blue dye are cancer causing, and they're banned in Europe, but we use them here left and right. Look up food dye. That's why when I go to a birthday party, I'm always scraping off the icing, all right, because of the dyes involved.
There you go. Wow. All right. So everybody get out there and get people aware and educate them on what they need to do. And let's get a bunch of PIMAG water systems into the societies. Thank you very much, Elaine. Really appreciate your knowledge here on this. And I hope everybody enjoyed that. And